أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين بالقاسم محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome to the group recitation of Holy Quran. Inshallah, we will start by the recitation of the fifth juz, or rather eighth juz of the Holy Quran, as it's being the eighth day of the month of Ramadan. Heather, you want to go first again?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولو أننا نزلنا إليهم الملائكة وكلمهم الموتى وحشرنا عليهم كل شيء قبلا ما كانوا ليؤمنوا إلا أن يشاء الله ولكن أكثرهم يجهلون وكذلك جعلنا لكل نبي عدوا شياطين الإنس والجن يوحي بعضهم إلى بعض زخرف القول غرورا ولو شاء ربك ما فعلوه فذرهم وما يفترون ولتصغى إليه أفئدة الذين لا يؤمنون بالآخرة وليرضوه وليقترفوا ما هم مقترفون أفغير الله أبتغي حكما وهو الذي أنزل إليكم الكتاب مفصلا والذين آتيناهم الكتاب يعلمون أنه منزل من ربك بالحق فلا تكونن من الممترين وتمت كلمة ربك صدقا وعدلا لا مبدل لكلماته وهو السميع العليم وإن تطع أكثر من في الأرض يضلوك عن سبيل الله إن يتبعون إلا الظن وإن هم إلا يخرصون إن ربك هو أعلم من يضل عن سبيله وهو أعلم بالمهتدين فكلوا إن ربك هو أعلم من يضل عن سبيله وهو أعلم بالمهتدين فكلوا مما ذكر اسم الله عليه إن كنتم بآياته مؤمنين وما لكم ألا تأكلوا مما ذكر اسم الله عليه وقد فصل لكم ما حرم عليكم إلا ما اضطررتم إليه وإن كثيرا ليضلون بأهوائهم بغير علم إن ربك هو أعلم بالمعتدين وذروا ظاهر الإثم وباطنه إن الذين يكسبون الإثم سيجزون بما كانوا يقترفون ولا تأكلوا مما لم يذكر اسم الله عليه وإنه لفسق وإن الشيطان ليوحون إلى أوليائهم ليجادلوكم وإن أطعتموهم إنكم لمشركون أومن كان ميتة فأحييناه وجعلنا له نورا يمشي به في الناس كمن مثله في الظلمات ليس بخارج منها كذلك زين للكافرين ما كانوا يعملون وكذلك جعلنا في كل قرية أكابر مجرميها ليمكروا فيها وما يمكرون إلا بأنفسهم وما يشعرون وإذا جاءتهم آية قالوا لن نؤمن حتى نؤتى مثل ما أوتي رسل الله أعلم حيث يجعل رسالته سيصيب الذين أجرموا صغار عند الله وعذاب شديد بما كانوا يمكرون فمن يرد الله أن يهديه يشرح صدره للإسلام ومن يرد أن يضله يجعل صدره ضيقا حرجا كأنما يسعد في السماء كذلك يجعل الله الرجس على الذين لا يؤمنون وهذا صراط ربك مستقيما قد فصلنا الآيات لقوم يذكرون لهم دار السلام عند ربهم وهو وليهم بما كانوا يعملون ويوم يحشرهم جميعا يا معشر الجن قد استكثرتم من الإنس وقال أولياؤهم من الإنس ربنا استمتع بعضنا ببعض وبلغنا أجلنا الذي أجلت لنا قال النار مثواكم خالدين فيها إلا ما شاء الله إن ربك حكيم عليم وكذلك نولي بعض الظالمين بعضا بما كانوا يكسبون يا معشر الجن والإنس ألم يأتكم رسل منكم يقصون عليكم آياتي وينذرونكم لقاء يومكم هذا قالوا شهدنا على أنفسنا وغرتهم الحياة الدنيا وشهدوا على أنفسهم أنهم كانوا كافرين ذلك أن لم يكن ربك مهلك القرى بظلم وأهلها غافلون ولكل درجات مما عملوا وما ربك بغافل عما يعملون وربك الغني ذو الرحمة إن يشاء يذهبكم ويستخلف من بعدكم ما يشاء كما أنشأكم من ذرية قوم آخرين إنما توعدون لآت وما أنتم بمعجزين قل يا قوم اعملوا على مكانتكم إني عامل فسوف تعلمون من تكون له عاقبة الدار إنه لا يفلح الظالمون وجعلوا لله مما ذرى من الحرث والأنعام نصيبا فقالوا هذا لله بزعمهم وهذا لشركائنا فما كان لشركائهم فلا يصل إلى الله وما كان لله فهو يصل إلى شركائهم ساء ما يحكمون وكذلك زين لكثير من المشركين قتل أولادهم شركاؤهم ليردوهم وليلبسوا عليهم دينهم ولو شاء الله ما فعلوه فذرهم وما يفترون وقالوا هذه أنعام وحرث حجر لا يطعمها إلا من نشاء بزعمهم وأنعام حرمت ظهورها وأنعام لا يذكرون اسم الله عليها افتراء عليه سيجزيهم بما كانوا يفترون وقالوا ما في بطون هذه الأنعام خالصة لذكورنا ومحرم على أزواجنا وإن يكن ميتة فهم فيه شركاء سيجزيهم وصفهم إنه حكيم عليم قد خسر الذين قتلوا أولادهم سفها بغير علم وحرموا ما رزقهم الله افتراء على الله قد ضلوا وما كانوا مهتدين
أحسنت. صدق الله العلي.
صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Rayhan, go ahead.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وهو الذي أنشأ جنات معروشات وغير معروشات والنخل والزرع مختلفا أكله والزيتون والرمان متشابها وغير متشابه كلوا من ثمره إذا أثمر وآتوا حقه يوم حصاده ولا تسرفوا إنه لا يحب المسرفين ومن الأنعام حمولة وفرشا كلوا مما رزقكم الله ولا تتبعوا خطوات الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين 8 أزواج من الضأن 2 ومن المعز 2 قل الذكرين حرم أم الأنثيين أم اشتملت عليه أرحام الأنثيين نبئني بعلم إن كنتم صادقين ومن الإبل 2 ومن البقر 2 قل الذكرين حرم أم الأنثيين أم اشتملت عليه أرحام الأنثيين أم كنتم شهداء إذ وصاكم الله بهذا فمن أظلم ممن افترى على الله كذبا ليضل الناس بغير علم إن الله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين قل لا أجد فيما أوحي إلي محرما على طاعم يطعمه إلا أن يكون ميتة أو دما مصفوحا أو لحم خنزير فإنه رجس أو فسقا أهل لغير الله به فمن اضطر غير باغ ولا عاد فإن ربك غفور رحيم وعلى الذين هادوا حرمنا كل ذي ظفر ومن البقر والغنم حرمنا عليهم شحومهما إلا ما حملت ظهورهما أو الحوايا أو ما اختلط بعظم ذلك جزيناهم ببغيهم وإنا لصادقون فإن كذبوك فقل ربكم ذو رحمة واسعة ولا يرد بأسه عن القوم المجرمين سيقول الذين أشركوا لو شاء الله ما أشركنا ولا آباؤنا ولا حرمنا من شيء كذلك كذب الذين من قبلهم حتى ذاقوا بأسنا قل هل عندكم من علم فتخرجوه لنا إن تتبعون إلا الظن وإن أنتم إلا تخرصون قل فلله الحجة البالغة فلو شاء لهداكم أجمعين قل حلما
هلما.
شهداءكم قل حلما
No, there's no
شهداءكم
tashdid on lam.
ها
قل هلما.
قل حلما شهدائكم الذين يشهدون أن الله حرم هذا فإن شهدوا فلا تشهد معهم ولا تتبع أهواء الذين كذبوا بآياتنا والذين لا يؤمنون بالآخرة وهم بربهم يعدلون قل تعالوا أتل ما حرم ربكم عليكم ألا تشركوا به شيئا وبالوالدين إحسانا ولا تقتلوا أولادكم من إملاق نحن نرزقكم وإياهم ولا تقربوا الفواحش ما ظهر منها وما بطن ولا تقتلوا النفس التي حرم الله إلا بالحق ذلكم وصاكم به لعلكم تعقلون ولا تقربوا مال اليتيم إلا بالتي هي أحسن حتى يبلغ أشده وأوفوا الكيل والميزان بالقسط لا نكلف نفسا إلا وسعها وإذا قلتم فاعدلوا ولو كان ذا قربى وبعهد الله أوفوا ذلكم وصاكم به لعلكم تذكرون وأن هذا صراطي مستقيما فاتبعوه ولا تتبعوا السبل فتفرق بكم عن سبيله ذلكم وصاكم به لعلكم تتقون ثم آتينا موسى الكتاب تماما على الذي أحسن وتفصيلا لكل شيء وهدى ورحمة لعلهم بلقاء ربهم يؤمنون صدق
أحسن.
الله العلي العظيم.
Inshallah. Go ahead, Amin bhai.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم هذا كتاب أنزلناه مبارك فاتبعوه واتقوا لعلكم ترحمون أن تقولوا إنما أنزل الكتاب على طائفتين من قبلنا وإن كنا عن دراستهم لغافلين أو تقولوا لو أنا أنزل علينا الكتاب لكنا أهدى منهم فقد جاءكم بينة من ربكم وهدى ورحمة فمن أظلم ممن كذب بآيات الله وصدف عنها وصدف عنها سنجزي الذين يحتفون عن آياتنا سوء العذاب بما كانوا يصدفون هل ينظرون إلا أن تأتيهم الملائكة أو يأتي ربك أو يأتي بعض آيات ربك يوم يأتي بعض آيات ربك لا ينفع نفسا إيمانها لم تكن آمنت من قبل أو كسبت في إيمانها خيرا قل انتظروا إنا منتظرون إن الذين فرقوا دينهم وكانوا شيعا لست منهم في شيء إنما أمرهم إلى الله ثم ينبئهم بما كانوا يفعلون من جاء بالحسنة فله عشر أمثالها ومن جاء بالسيئة فلا يجزى إلا مثلها وهم لا يظلمون قل إنني هداني ربي إلى صراط مستقيم دينا قيما ملة إبراهيم حنيفا وما كان من المشركين قل إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين لا شريك له وبذلك أمرت وأنا أول المسلمين قل أغير الله أبغي ربا وهو رب كل شيء
ربا. Read it again. قل أغير الله أبغي ربا.
قل أغير الله أبغي ربا وهو رب كل شيء ولا تكسب كل نفس إلا عليها ولا تزر وازرة وزر أخرى ثم إلى ربكم مرجعكم فينبئكم بما كنتم فيه تختلفون وهو الذي جعلكم خلائف الأرض ورفع بعضكم فوق بعض درجات ليبلوكم فيما آتاكم إن ربك سريع العقاب وإنه لغفور رحيم.
أحسنت ما شاء الله. Linda, you want to read?
No, it's okay.
You can read the ruku if you want to. Yeah.
Okay, I'll just read one. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alif Lam Mim Sad. كتاب أنزل إليك فلا يكن في صدرك حرج منه لتنذر به وذكرى للمؤمنين اتبعوا ما أنزل إليكم من ربكم ولا تتبعوا من دونه أولياء قليلا ما تذكرون وكم من قرية أهلكناها فجاءها بأسنا بياتا أو هم قائلون فما كان دعواهم إذا جاءهم بأسنا
إذ
إلا أن قالوا
جاءهم
إذ جاءهم بأسنا إلا أن قالوا إنا كنا ظالمين ولنسألن الذين أرسل إليهم ولنسألن المرسلين ولنقصن عليهم بعلم وما كنا غائبين والوزن يومئذ الحق فمن ثقلت موازينه فأولئك هم المفلحون ومن خفت موازينه فأولئك الذين خسروا أنفسهم بما كانوا بآياتنا يظلمون ولقد مكناكم في الأرض وجعلنا لكم فيها معايش قليلا ما يشكرون صدق الله العلي العظيم.
أحسنت. شباب भाई.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولقد خلقناكم ثم صورناكم ثم قلنا للملائكة اسجدوا لآدم فسجدوا إلا إبليس لم يكن من الساجدين قال ما منعك ألا تسجد إذ أمرتك قال أنا خير منه خلقتني من نار وخلقته من طين قال فاهبط منها فما يكون لك أن تتكبر فيها فاخرج إنك من الصاغرين قال أنظرني إلى يوم يبعثون قال إنك من المنذرين قال فبما أغويتني لأقعدن لهم صراطك المستقيم ثم لآتينهم من بين يديهم ومن خلفهم وعن أيمانهم وعن شمائلهم ولا تجد أكثرهم شاكرين قال اخرج منها مذءوما مدحورا لمن تبعك منهم لأملأن جهنم منكم أجمعين ويا آدم اسكن أنت وزوجك الجنة فكلا من حيث شئتما ولا تقربا هذه الشجرة فتكونا من الظالمين ووسوس لهما الشيطان ليبدي لهما ما وري عنهما من سوآتهما وقال ما نهاكما ربكما عن هذه الشجرات إلا أن تكونا ملكين أو تكونا من الخالدين وقاسمهما إني لكما لمن الناصحين فدلاهما بغرور فلما ذاقا الشجرة بدت لهما سوآتهما وطافقا يخصفان عليهما من ورق الجنة وناداهما ربهما ألم أنهاكما عن تلكما الشجرات وأقل لكما إن الشيطان لكما عدو مبين قال ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين قال اهبطوا بعضكم لبعض عدو ولكم في الأرض مستقر ومتاع إلى حين قال فيها تحيون وفي تموتون ومنها تخرجون يا بني آدم قد أنزلنا عليكم لباس يواري سوآتكم وريشا ولباس التقوى ذلك خير ذلك من آيات الله لعلهم يذكرون يا بني آدم يذكرون يذكرون يا بني آدم لا يفتننكم الشيطان كما أخرج أبويكم من الجنة ينزع عنهما لباسهما ليريهما سوآتهما إنه يراكم هو وقبيله من حيث لا ترونهم إنا جعلنا الشياطين أولياء للذين لا يؤمنون وإذا فعلوا فاحشة قالوا وجدنا عليها آباءنا والله أمرنا بها قل إن الله لا يأمر بالفحشاء أتأكلون على الله ما لا تعلمون قل أمر ربي بالقسط وأقيموا وجوهكم عند كل مسجد وادعوه مخلصين له الدين كما بدأكم تعودون فريقا هدى وفريقا حق عليهم الضلالة إنهم اتخذوا الشياطين أولياء من دون الله ويحسبون أنهم مهتدون يا بني آدم خذوا زينتكم عند كل مسجد وكلوا واشربوا ولا تسرفوا إنه لا يحب المسرفين قل من حرم زينة الله التي أخرج لعباده والطيبات من الرزق قل هي للذين آمنوا في الحياة الدنيا خالصة يوم القيامة كذلك نفصل الآيات لقوم يعلمون قل إنما حرم ربي الفواحش ما ظهر منها وما بطن والإثم والبغي بغير الحق وأن تشركوا بالله ما لم ينزل به سلطانا وأن تقولوا على الله ما لا تعلمون ولكل أمة أجل وإذا جاء أجالهم لا يستأخرون ساعة ولا يستقدمون يا بني آدم إما يأتينكم رسل منكم يقصون عليكم آياتي فمن اتقى وأصلح فلا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون والذين كذبوا بآياتنا واستكبروا عنها أولئك أصحاب النار هم فيها خالدون فمن أظلم ممن افترى على الله كاذبا أو كذب بآياتي أولئك ينالهم نصيبهم من الكتاب حتى إذا جاءتهم رسلنا يتوفونهم قالوا أين ما كنتم تدعون من دون الله قالوا دلوا عنا وشاهدوا على أنفسهم أنهم كانوا كافرين قال ادخلوا في أمم قد خلت من قبلكم من الجن والإنس في النار كلما دخلت أمة لعنت أختها حتى إذا اداركوا فيها جميعا قالت أخراهم لأولاهم ربنا هؤلاء أضلونا فآتهم عذابا ضعفا من النار قال لكل ضيف قال لكل ضعف ولكن لا تعلمون وقالت أولاهم لأخراهم فما كان لكم علينا من فضل علينا وقالت أولاهم لأخراهم فما كان لكم علينا من فضل فذوقوا العذاب بما كنتم تكسبون إن الذين كذبوا بآياتنا واستكبروا عنها لا يفتح لهم أبواب السماء ولا يدخلون الجنة حتى يلج الجمل في سم الخياط وكذلك نجزي المجرمين لهم من جهنم مهاد ومن فوقهم غواش وكذلك نجزي الظالمين والذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات لا نكلف نفسا إلا وسعها أولئك أصحاب الجنة هم فيها خالدون ونزعنا ما في صدورهم من غل تجري من تحتهم الأنهار وقالوا الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله لقد جاءت رسل ربنا بالحق ونودوا أن تلكم الجنة أورثتموها بما كنتم تعملون ونادى أصحاب الجنة أصحاب النار أن قد وجدنا ما وعدنا ربنا حقا فهل وجدتم ما وعد ربكم حقا قالوا نعم فأذن مؤذن بينهم أن لعنة الله على الظالمين الذين يصدون عن سبيل الله ويبغونها عوجا وهم بالآخرة كافرون وبينهما حجاب وعلى الأعراف رجال يعرفون كل بسيماهم ونادوا أصحاب الجنة أن سلام عليكم لم يدخلوها وهم يطمعون وإذا صرفت أبصارهم تلقاء أصحاب النار قالوا ربنا لا تجعلنا مع القوم الظالمين صدق الله العلي العظيم.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فنادى أصحاب الأعراف رجالا يعرفونهم بسيماهم قالوا ما أغنى عنكم جمعكم وما كنتم تستكبرون أهؤلاء الذين أقسمتم لا ينالهم الله برحمة ادخلوا الجنة لا خوف عليكم ولا أنتم تحزنون فنادى أصحاب النار أصحاب الجنة أن أفيضوا علينا من الماء ومما رزقكم الله قالوا إن الله حرمهم على الكافرين الذين اتخذوا دينهم لهوا ولعبا وغرتهم الحياة الدنيا فاليوم ننساهم كما نسوا لقاء يومهم هذا وما كانوا بآياتنا يجحدون ولقد جئناهم بكتاب فصلناه على علم هدى ورحمة لقوم يؤمنون هل ينظرون إلا تاويله يوم يأتي تاويله يقول الذين نسوه من قبل قد جاءت رسل ربنا بالحق فهل لنا من شفعاء فيشفعوا لنا أو نرد فنعمل غير الذي كنا نعمل قد خسروا أنفسهم وضل عنهم ما كانوا يفترون إن ربكم الله الذي خلق السماوات والأرض في 6 أيام ثم استوى على العرش يغشي الليل النهار يطلبه حثيثا والشمس والقمر والنجوم مسخرات بأمره بدا له الخلق والأمر تبارك الله رب العالمين ادعوا ربكم تضرعا وخفيا إنه لا يحب المعتدين ولا تفسدوا في الأرض بعد إصلاحها ادعوه خوفا وطمعا إن رحمة الله قريب من المحسنين وهو الذي يرسل الرياح بشرا بين يدي رحمته حتى إذا قلت سحابا ثقالا سقناه لبلد ميت فأنزلنا به الماء فأخرجنا به من كل الثمرات كذلك نخرج الموتى لعلكم تذكرون والبلد الطيب يخرج نباته بإذن ربه والذي خبث لا يخرج إلا نكدا كذلك نصرف الآيات لقوم يشكرون لقد أرسلنا نوحا إلى قومه فقال يا قوم اعبدوا الله ما لكم من إله غيره إني أخاف عليكم عذاب يوم عظيم قال الملأ من قومه إلا لنراك في ضلال مبين قال يا قوم ليس بي ضلالة ولكني رسول من رب العالمين أبلغكم رسالات ربي وأنصح لكم وعالم من الله ما لا تعلمون أو عجبتم أن جاءكم ذكر من ربكم على رجل منكم لينذركم ولتتقوا ولعلكم ترحمون فكذبوه فأنجيناه والذين معه في الفلك وأغرقنا الذين كذبوا بآياتنا إنهم كانوا قوما عمين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإلى عاد أخاهم هودا قال يا قوم اعبدوا الله ما لكم من إله غيره أفلا تتقون قال الملأ الذين كفروا من قومه إنا لنراك في سفاهة وإنا لنظنك من الكاذبين. قال يا قوم ليس بي سفاهة ولكني رسول من رب العالمين أبلغكم رسالات ربي وأنا لكم ناصح أمين. أفعجبتم أن جاءكم ذكر من ربكم على رجل منكم لينذركم واذكروا إذ جعلكم خلفاء من بعد قوم نوح وزادكم في الخلق بسطة فاذكروا آلاء الله لعلكم تفلحون. قال وجئتنا لنعبد الله وحده ونذر ما كان يعبد آباؤنا فاتنا ما تعدنا إن كنت من الصادقين. قال فقد وقع عليكم من ربكم رجس وغضب وتجادلونني في أسماء سميتموها أنتم وآباؤكم ما نزل الله بها من سلطان فانتظروا إني معكم من المنتظرين. فأنجيناه والذين معه برحمة منا وقطعنا دابر الذين كذبوا بآياتنا وما كانوا مؤمنين.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وإلى ثمود أخاهم صالحا قال يا قوم اعبدوا الله ما لكم من إله غيره قد جاءتكم بينة من ربكم هذه ناقة الله لكم آية فذروها تأكل في أرض الله ولا تمسوها بسوء فيأخذكم عذاب أليم. واذكروا إذ جعلكم خلفاء من بعد عاد وبوأكم في الأرض تتخذون من سهولها قصورا وتنحتون الجبال بيوتا فاذكروا آلاء الله ولا تعثوا في الأرض مفسدين. قال الملأ الذين استكبروا من قومه للذين استضعفوا لمن آمن منهم أتعلمون أن صالحا مرسل من ربه قالوا إنا بما أرسل به مؤمنون. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قال الذين استكبروا إنا بالذي آمنتم به كافرون فأقروا الناقة وعتوا عن أمر ربهم وقالوا يا صالح ائتنا بما تعدنا إن كنت من المرسلين فأخذتهم الرجفة فأصبحوا في دارهم جاثمين. فتولى عنهم وقال يا قوم لقد أبلغتكم رسالة ربي ونصحت لكم ولكن لا تحبون الناصحين. ولوطا إذ قال لقومه أتأتون الفاحشة ما سبقكم بها من أحد من العالمين إنكم لتأتون الرجال شهوة من دون النساء بل أنتم قوم مسرفون. وما كان جواب قومه إلا أن قالوا أخرجوهم من قريتكم إنهم أناس يتطهرون. فأنجيناه وأهله إلا امرأته كانت من الغابرين وأمطرنا عليهم مطرا فانظر كيف كان عاقبة المجرمين. وإلى مدين أخاهم شعيبا قال يا قوم اعبدوا الله ما لكم من إله غيره قد جاءتكم بينة من ربكم فأوفوا الكيل والميزان ولا تبخسوا الناس أشياءهم ولا تفسدوا في الأرض بعد إصلاحها ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم مؤمنين. ولا تقعدوا بكل صراط توعدون وتصدون عن سبيل الله من آمن به وتبغونها عوجا واذكروا إذ كنتم قليلا فكثركم وانظروا كيف كان عاقبة المفسدين. وإن كان طائفة منكم آمنوا بالذي أرسلت به وطائفة لم يؤمنوا فاصبروا حتى يحكم الله بيننا وهو خير الحاكمين صدق الله العلي العظيم. Thank you very much for listening. Inshallah, I'll go over the gist of this 8th juz of Holy Quran. About 10 minutes that I have, so inshallah I'll try and be as concise or go in a little bit details if I have time. There are two sections of this juz. First section is on the remainder of Surah An'am, and the second section is the beginning of Surah Araf. In Surah An'am, there are a few things. Number one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins by giving the Holy Prophet some solace, some tasalli, gives him, sort of like, speaking to him in a way that, don't feel bad, don't feel sad if these people are not listening to you. You've been working hard, you've been telling him to believe in Allah, believe in your prophethood, but they're not paying attention, they're not listening to you, so don't feel as if you have lost the deal and you've lost the heart, but there is still hope in it. So this ayat was revealed that even if we had sent down angels to them and the dead had spoken to them and we had gathered before them all things manifestly, they would still not believe unless Allah wished. So regardless of what you do, they will still not believe. Second is, how they're renouncing the outward and the inward sins. So sometimes sins are outward, openly done, and sometimes sins are, makhfi, they're not open. So how there's a denouncing that you should restrain yourself from both types of sins, whether they're outward or inward. That's ayah number 120. You hear in this surah very often the concept of maut and hayat is repeated. Maut and hayat, life and death, life and death. In fact, here life and death is not referring to the literal life and death. Life and death is actually referring to the spiritual sense of kufr and iman. That those who are alive are those who are mu'mineen. Those who are dead are actually the ones who are kuffar. So that's the comparison that is being given here. Faith and iman is like a soul in a dead body, by which a person walks amongst the people. أَوَمَنْ كَانَ مَيْتًا فَأَحْيَيْنَاهُ وَجَعَلْنَا لَهُ نُورًا يَمْشِي بِهِ فِي النَّاسِ. It says, it is he who was lifeless. Then we gave him life and provided him with a light by which he walks amongst the people. So what does that mean? That means we gave them light. Light here refers to the light of iman. Every individual, his ranks and darajat are based on his amal and his actions. So ayah number 132 talks about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is well aware of every one of you. You don't have to go ahead and speak of anyone. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is aware of what anyone does, and your amal and your darajat and your ranks will be determined the fact that how much actions or how many actions or how good your actions have been. In reference to the hypocrites, there are four things that are mentioned which lack sense. Mushrikeen, they used to say or do things which would lack a lot of sense. And so we can compare if there are any things that we are doing today that also lacks sense. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala highlights these things that mushrikeen were doing, which was lacking a lot of sense, yet they were still doing because their aba wa ajdad, their forefathers, used to do it. Number one, these people had a share for Allah in their sacrifice. So they will sacrifice an animal and they'll say, well, this share belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nobody can eat from that share that belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they would divide these different shares, and then they will give one share to Allah, saying that nothing can be mixed with that share. And then if something was mixed with the share of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so they would not consider that to be anything bad. They would go ahead and sacrifice their children or kill their children rather, because they would feel poverty. Min khashyati amlaq, right? The ayat talked about it, ayat number 136, that they would kill their awlad, they would kill their children and their awlad because of the fear of poverty, and it might have been rather their daughters, not their sons. They would kill their daughters because it was matter of, sharm for them, that there's a ar in it for them, and therefore it was poverty also included with that. They would divide their animals into different parts. One part would be for their leaders, their monks, right? Their scholars. Second was, upon which that you cannot travel, you cannot ride those animals. And third, that would be, sacrifice for ghairullah. So this is how they had divided. This is in ayat number 138. There are some, aqaid of the mushrikeen that are mentioned over here. The aqidah of jabr, that forcefulness, that things are forced upon you, and insan is majbur. So whatever happens, this is your destiny, and you can't alter it, and you can't change. So they would go ahead and perform their actions, do their evil deeds, and then they would blame it on what? The destiny and the fate. Oh, this is what was written in your nasib. This is what you had deserved. This is what was, bound to happen. So it happened. Similar to what, someone said, if Yazid didn't kill Imam Hussein, someone else would have killed him. So someone had to kill Imam Hussein. So it was Yazid through whom Imam Hussein was killed. So they try to justify their actions by blaming it on what? Blaming on qada and qadar, that this is how it was destined to happen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Prophet that tell these people that my Lord has guided you toward Sirat al-Mustaqim, that deen which is muhkam, which is strong, and it is the deen of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. This is ayah number 161, talks about that. These are very beautiful ayat back to back from 60, 161, 162. All of the ayat are beautiful, but you see that the continuation in these ayat as they go along. That in 162, for example, قُلْ إِنَّ صَلَاتِي وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايِ وَمَاتِي لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. That tell them that my salat, all of my ibadat, all of my manasik, my life, my death, all are for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That means all of my wujud and my existence is for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Two of the ni'mat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are mentioned. One is that, the lands that you farm, farming lands upon which, minerals and edibles grow. Second, the animals that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created for you, these four-legged animals from which you take a lot of benefit from by utilizing them for your travels, for your rides, for your food, for your milk, and many other things that you get out of them from. So this is, I guess that's why the name of the surah is An'am, that it is speaking about these four-legged animals. These ni'mat, although, are also a test for you. They're not just given without being a test for you. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given darajat, high ranks to some individuals, and they are tested and they are put into trials by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's in ayah number 165. There are about 10 advices that are given, 10 nasaih that are given over here. Number one, that do not associate anyone with Allah, ayah number 151. Be kind to your parents, the same ayah talks about it. Do not kill your children, same ayah number 151. Remain away from any sort of evil and indecency, same ayah talks about it. Don't kill anyone without proper justice, same ayah talks about it. Very next ayah, number 152, gives us other advices. For example, don't consume the wealth of those who are orphan. When you are dealing with people, when someone is buying something from you, awful kail, make sure that you measure it to the measure that is proper. Don't sell less for more money. I guess you say, well, how is that applicable today? Well, it's applicable even though you're not weighing anything, but the way you weigh today by selling things, make sure that you are truthful in that. Make sure that you fulfill the rights that you have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. when you speak to someone, make sure that you keep in mind insaf, and you are dealing with them in proper justice and with equality. Sirat al-Mustaqim is the path that you should adopt. That's the very next ayat. Um, Aside from that, there are four more things that are mentioned in the surah that I'll skip, because there's entire discussion in Surah Araf as well. Surah Araf, begins by counting the ni'mat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The first ni'mat is counted is Quran Kareem. That this Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed unto you, that is indeed what? This is a ni'mat for you. What does this Quran talk about? This Quran talks about giving people advice, warns them, gives them heads up if they are making a mistake. It has nasihat for, Ahle Iman, those who are faithful. They find much nasai and advice from Quran. They don't just use this book as a book of reading, a novel that they would read and they'll put it away. Then rather they use it as a book which is a guidance for them and is full of advice for them. Don't follow anyone else, rather follow this Quran, and that's what's mentioned in ayat number 1 to 3. As far as the khilqat of insan is concerned, that is mentioned in these beginning ayat. Insan, is made to be the one that malaika have done sajda to. So the discussion of that insan is masjud malaika, Hazrat Adam alayhi salatu wasalam, how he was masjud of malaika, that malaika were ordered to go ahead and do sajda to him. Then the discussion is in reference to how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought about azab to some towns, how they were put to ruin. They were ruined, and then because they accepted their faults, but it was delayed in acceptance. So otherwise they would have been given the ability to go ahead and do istighfar. They were given enough chance, but because they delayed it so much, it did not help them out. Discussion about the khilqat of insan, his shakl, his surat, his face, and all of these things are mentioned in it. Iblis, how he did not go ahead and do sajda to Hazrat Adam alayhi wasalam because of his takabbur, this arrogance that he showed. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he denied the hukum of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more than anything. He denied the hukum of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and therefore he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give him respite until the day of judgment. But Allah says, ila waqtin ma'lum, you have time, whatever it is that you want to do. He said, I'll sit on the path of the people, I'll beautify the path for the people, I will come from an shamalihim and yaminihim, I'll come from right side and the left side and the front and the back, and I will misguide your followers. But still Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kept two places and two directions open which shaitan cannot penetrate. One is when you raise your hands to the heavens and in dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Second, when you put your head down in prostration to sajda. These two are not penetratable by shaitan, and they're open for you to go ahead and perform. So we find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has countered, even though he has given permission for shaitan to go ahead and do. But he also said, shaitan himself is admitting the fact that I'll misguide everyone except those who are what? Those who are ibaduka salihun, those who are the righteous servants of yours. There's a lot of discussion in reference to do not do israf, kulu washrubu, wala tusrifu. Discussion in reference to how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created halal zinat for you. So not all types of beautifications are haram and forbidden. No, there are certain beautifications which are also halal for you. Khudu zinatakum inda kulli masjidin is mentioned. And inshallah, there's a discussion of some of the ashab, which are known as ashab-e Araf. So that's why the name of the surah Araf is there, that these are the ashab and these are the companions which are known as Araf. And some of their sifat is mentioned, that they will be at the highest of the level when it comes to Jannat or Jahannam. Or rather, these are the people, they will be able to recognize people by their faces. They will be able to speak to people who are entering into paradise or those who are entering into the Jahannam. So these are some of the attributes of these people are mentioned. And there are a lot of other discussion that is going to take a lot of time. So I'll refrain from going into those further details. There are some stories of Anbiya that are mentioned, which are worth mentioning. 5, in fact. Nabi, their stories are mentioned: Qawm Nuh, Qawm Ad, Qawm Thamud, Qawm Lut, and Qawm Shu'aib. So all of these discussions are also mentioned in this chapter, and inshallah we will discuss them tomorrow if I have more time. Thank you very much for tuning in, and inshallah come back at 9 p.m. with the start of the daily nightly program with dua iftitah followed by the speech. Wa khudāwana alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome back to our nightly program. Inshallah, we will be starting with the recitation of Dua Iftitah. Before that, I would like to acknowledge the sponsors for tonight. Let's see. Mr. Nadeem Salim of United Wealth Group. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept his sponsorship, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant, elevate the status of his marhumin. Please recite a Surah Fatiha for his marhumin as well as yours. Surah Fatiha. Bismillah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله احد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا احد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله احد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا احد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله احد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا احد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. Go ahead, Ahmed, you can share the screen.
Is it visible?
Yes, it's visible. Who's reciting? Riyan is reciting?
Mazhar, I'm here.
Good. Mazhar bhai, go ahead.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma rabba shahri Ramadan. الذي أنزلت فيه القرآن وافترزت على عبادك فيه الصيام صل على محمد وآل محمد وارزقني حج بيتك الحرام في عامي هذا وفي كل عام واغفر لي تلك الذنوب العظام فإنه لا يغفرها غيرك يا رحمن يا علام. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أفتتح الثناء بحمدك وأنت مسدد للصواب بمنك وأيقنت أنك أنت أرحم الراحمين في موضع العفو والرحمة وشد المعاقبين في موضع النكال والنكمة وعظم المتجبرين في موضع الكبرياء والعظمة. اللهم أذنت لي في دعائك ومسألتك فاسمع يا سميع مدحتي وأجب يا رحيم دعوتي وأكل يا غفور أثرتي فكم يا إلهي من كربة قد فرجتها وهموم قد كشفتها وأثرة قد أكلتها ورحمة قد نشرتها وحلكة بلاء قد فككتها. الحمد لله الذي لم يتخذ صاحبة ولا ولدا ولم يكن له شريك في الملك ولم يكن له ولي من الذل وكبره تكبيرا. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الحمد لله بجميع محامده كلها على جميع نعمه كلها. الحمد لله الذي لا مضاد له في ملكه ولا منازع له في أمره. الحمد لله الذي لا شريك له في خلقه ولا شبيه له في عظمته. الحمد لله الفاشي في الخلق أمره، وحمده الظاهر بالكرم مجده، الباسط بالجود يداه، الذي لا تنقص خزائنه ولا تزيده كثرة العطاء إلا جودا وكرما، إنه هو العزيز الوهاب. اللهم إني أسألك قليلا من كثير، مع حاجة بي إليه عظيمة، وغناك عنه قديم، وهو عندي كثير، وهو عليك سهل يسير. اللهم إنا عفوك عن ذنبي، وتجاوزك عن خطيئتي، وصفحك عن ظلمي، وسترك على قبيح عملي، وحلمك عن كثير جرمي. عندما كان من خطئي وعمدي أطمعني في أن أسألك ما لا أستوجبه منك، الذي رزقتني من رحمتك، وأريتني من قدرتك، وعرفتني من إجابتك، فصرت أدعوك آمنا وأسألك مستأنسا، لا خائفا ولا وجلا، مدلا عليك فيما كسدت فيه إليك. فإن عبت عني تبت بجهلي عليك، ولعل الذي عبت عني هو خير لي لعلمك بعاقبة الأمور. فلم أر مولا كريما أصبر على عبد لئيم منك علي. يا ربي إنك تدعوني فأولي عنك، وتتحبب إلي فأتبغض إليك، وتتودد إلي فلا أقبل منك كأن لي التطول عليك. فلم يمنعك ذلك من الرحمة لي والإحسان إلي والتفضل علي بجودك وكرمك. فارحم عبدك الجاهل، وجد عليه بفضل إحسانك، إنك جواد كريم. الحمد لله مالك الملك، مجري الفلك، مسخر الرياح، فالك الإصباح، ديان الدين رب العالمين. الحمد لله على حلمه بعد علمه، والحمد لله على عفوه بعد قدرته، والحمد لله على طول أناته في غضبه، وهو قادر على ما يريد. الحمد لله خالق الخلق، باسط الرزق، فالك الإصباح، ذي الجلال والإكرام والفضل والإنعام، الذي بود فلا يرى، وكرب فشهد النجوى تبارك وتعالى. الحمد لله الذي ليس له منازع يعادله، ولا شبيه يشاكله، ولا ظهير يعاذده. قهر بعزته العزاء، وتواضع لعظمته العظمى، فبلغ بقدرته ما يشاء. الحمد لله الذي يجيبني حين أناديه، ويستر علي كل عورة وعناسيه، ويؤدم النعمة علي فلا أجازيه. فكم من موهبة حنيئة قد أعطاني، وعظيمة مخوفة قد كفاني، وبهجة مونكة قد أراني. فأثني عليه حامدا وأذكره مسبحا. الحمد لله الذي لا يهتك حجابه، ولا يغلق بابه، ولا يرد السائل، ولا يخيب عامله. الحمد لله الذي يؤمن الخائفين، وينجي الصالحين، ويرفع المستضعفين، ويذع المستكبرين، ويهلك ملوكا ويستخلف آخرين. والحمد لله قاسم الجبارين، مبير الظالمين، مدرك الحاربين، نكال الظالمين، صريخ المستصرخين، موضي حاجات الطالبين، معتمد المؤمنين. الحمد لله الذي من خشيته ترعد السماء وسكانها وترجف الأرض وأمارها وتموج البحار ومن يسطو في غمراتها. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. الحمد لله الذي يخلق ولم يخلق ويرزق ولا يرزق ويطعم ولا يطعم ويميت الأحياء ويحيي الموتى وهو حي لا يموت بيده الخير وهو على كل شيء قدير. اللهم صل على محمد عبدك ورسولك وأمينك وصفيك وحبيبك وخيرتك من خلقك وحافظ سرك ومبلغ رسالاتك أفضل وأحسن وأجمل وأكمل وأزكى وأنمى وأطيب وأطهر وأسنى وأكثر ما صليت وباركت وترحمت وتحننت وسلمت على أحد من عبادك وأنبيائك ورسلك وصفوتك وأهل الكرامة عليك من خلقك. اللهم وصل على علي أمير المؤمنين ووصي رسول رب العالمين عبدك ووليك وأخي رسولك وحجتك على خلقك وآيتك الكبرى والنبأ العظيم وصل على صديقة الطاهرة فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين وصل على سبتي الرحمة وإمامي الهدى الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة وصل على أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهدي حججك على عبادك وأمنائك في بلادك صلاة كثيرة دائما. اللهم وصل على ولي أمرك القائم المؤمل والعدل المنتظر وحفه بملائكتك المقربين وأيده بروح القدس يا رب العالمين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم اجعله الداعي إلى كتابك والقائم بدينك استخلفه في الأرض كما استخلفت الذين من قبله مكن له دينه الذي ارتضيته له أبدله من بعد خوفه أمنا يعبدك لا يشرك بك شيئا. اللهم أعزه وعزز به وانصره وانتصر به وانصره نصرا عزيزا وافتح له فتحا يسيرا واجعل له من لدنك سلطانا نصيرا. اللهم أظهر به دينك وسنة نبيك حتى لا يستخفي بشيء من الحق مخافة أحد من الخلق. اللهم إنا نرغب إليك في دولة كريمة تعز بها الإسلام وأهله وتذل بها النفاق وأهله وتجعلنا فيها من الضاعة إلى طاعتك والقادة إلى سبيلك وترزقنا بها كرامة الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم ما عرفتنا من الحق فحملنا وما كسرنا عنه فبلغنا. اللهم المم به شأثنا واشأب به صدعنا وارتق به فتكنا وكثر به كلتنا وعزز به ذلتنا وأغن به عائلنا واقض به عن مغرمنا واجبر به فقرنا وسد به خلتنا ويسر به أسرنا وبيض به وجوهنا وفك به أسرنا وأنجه به طلبتنا وأنجز به مواعيدنا واستجب به دعوتنا وآتنا به سؤلنا وبلغنا به من الدنيا والآخرة آمالنا وآتنا به فوق رغبتنا يا خير المسؤولين وأوسع المعطين اشف به صدورنا وأذهب به غيظ قلوبنا وهدنا به لما اختلف فيه من الحق بإذنك إنك تهدي من تشاء إلى صراط مستقيم وانصرنا به على عدوك وعدونا إله الحق آمين اللهم إنا نشكو إليك فقد نبينا صلواتك عليه وآله وغيبة ولينا وكثرة عدونا وقلة عددنا وشدة الفتن بنا وتظاهر الزمان علينا فصل على محمد وآل محمد وإنا على ذلك بفتح منك تؤجله وبذر تخشفه ونصر تؤزه وسلطان حق تظهره ورحمة منك تجللناها وآفية منك تلبسناها برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم صل على
اللهم صل على محمد
محمد سورة الفاتحة
Thank you very much for that beautiful recitation. Before I continue, inshallah, we will listen to a message from the Secretary of Masjid-e-Ali, Brother Mustafa Kareem. Let me see if I can turn it.
Assalamu alaikum, Ramadan Kareem. With Masjid-e-Ali being closed due to the pandemic, we have been unable to hold our Ramadan programs that we have been so much accustomed to in the past many years. However, we are trying our best to bring in the spirit of the holy month into your homes, for which we have organized online programs. 7 o'clock daily, we start with the recitation of the Holy Quran, and after the families conclude with the iftar, we start again with the recitation of Dua Iftitah and Maulana speech at 9 p.m. Even though the masjid is closed, our homes have been transformed into little masajids in Imam Bargahs, where we have salat, where we recite our duas, and where we have our iftaris. Most of us in the community are able to cope with the current state of affairs. However, there are few in our community and outside. They are not able to sustain the difficulties posed to them because of the loss of income, loss of jobs, or whatever other causes that might be. For this, we have opened up the sponsorship of the daily programs, where we are urging the community members to sponsor the programs and donate generously. We'll be using these funds to help the needy, so they do not wonder where their next iftar is coming from, and also for the upkeep of the masjid. Even though the masjid is closed, there are bills to pay. We do not know when we'll be able to congregate again at the masjid, but we follow the guidance and the executive orders that are being sent by the governor of New Jersey. Let us pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us relief from this wabah, and that we are able to congregate at Masjid very soon, inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum.
Santam. Thank you very much for that beautiful message. It's important to, you know, adhere to some of the things that Brother Mustafa Karim was mentioning, and inshallah, with your full cooperation, we'll be able to go through this difficult time. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Tonight is the 8th day of the month of Holy Ramadan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your amal, your du'as, your supplications in these holy nights. Continuing with our discussions, I like to begin with the dua for the 8th day of month of Ramadan, which is Allahumma rzuqni fihi rahmatal aytam wa it'am at-ta'am wa ifsha as-salam wa suhbat al-kiram bitawlika ya malja al-amilin, in which we make this dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, oh Allah, on this day, please grant me having mercy upon the orphans and serving the food to those who are in need, and greeting the people and accompanying the noble ones out of your favoring, or the shelter of those who are hopeful, or the shelter of those who are of the hopeful ones. With this dua, let's begin. If you remember, a quick recap of what we were discussing last night. Last night, our discussion was in reference to the calamities of the tongue. That one of the favors and the biggest favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we had counted, is this tongue that He has given to us. That this tongue is a tool with which insan can perform the best of the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and at the same time insan can perform the worst and the most evil of the acts. Yes. So the same tool could be utilized for both good and the bad. In fact, if you remember one of these sayings of Luqman Hakim, Luqman the wise, who is also quoted in Quran, there's a whole chapter named after Luqman, that one day when Luqman used to be a slave, his master asked him to prepare the best part of the meat of an animal. Luqman went ahead and prepared the tongue for it to be served. His master ate it, and then he said, prepare for me the worst part of the meat of an animal. Luqman prepared the same exact thing. He prepared for him the tongue again. His master was surprised. He said, I know you're wise. Therefore, tell me the wisdom behind preparing the same thing for both good and bad. And then, of course, the answer was same as I just told you, that with this tongue, the best of the actions could be performed, by which you can attain the highest of the ranks in the bargah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And with the same tongue, the worst of the actions can be performed, and therefore could entail the most severe wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So tongue is the only organ in our body which has the capability of performing the best worship, that is the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and as well as the worst of the sins. Calamities of this organ, as we were mentioning last night, are big and above and beyond any other organs. It has made people become Ahl Jahannam. Therefore, whoever has control over it reaches prosperity. Yes, if you're able to utilize it properly, if you're able to put it to use in the right way, then not only you will attain prosperity, but many people can attain prosperity along side with you. And whoever lets it loose accumulated ugliest of the deeds in the book of his actions. And therefore some of the sins of this tongue are ghibat, tuhmat, lying, slandering, backbiting, blaming others, ridiculing them, altercation, quarrel about something which is unimportant, obscenity, vulgarity, and also talking too much. Yes, these are all the follies of this tongue, and not limited to, but some of the follies of this tongue. And that's why we find in the kalam of the Holy Prophet Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, in which the Prophet said, إِذَا رَأَيْتُمُ الْمُؤْمِنَ صَمُوتًا فَادْنُوا مِنْهُ فَإِنَّهُ يُلْقِي الْحِكْمَةَ وَالْمُؤْمِنُ قَلِيلُ الْكَلَامِ كَثِيرُ الْعَمَلِ وَالْمُنَافِقُ كَثِيرُ الْكَلَامِ قَلِيلُ الْعَمَلِ. He said, whenever you see a silent mu'min, silent in the sense that doesn't talk at all, silent in the sense that he talks very little, but whenever he speaks and opens his mouth, it's full of wisdom. So the Prophet said, get close to him, as he will bestow wisdom upon you. Mu'min is someone who speaks less and acts more. You know, that there's more shown through the actions of the individual than there is through the speech of the individual. And munafiq is someone who speaks a lot but acts very little. You know, I heard someone was quoting the kalam of Maulana Muttaqiyan. I have not verified the kalam myself, but it sounds like it would be the kalam of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam, in which Imam said, you don't have to guide people through your, wa'az and your speeches and your lectures and your sermons, nor do you have to, influence people through your sword. You can keep the sword where it belongs, and you can keep your silence as well, but at the same time be able to guide as well. Kunu du'atan linnase bighayri alsinatikum, something down that line. That be the ones who guide people and call people toward haqq bighayri alsinatikum, without using your tongue, without having to utilize your tongue. How do you do that? That's done through your actions. That's done through your behavior. That when people look up to you, when they see your behavior, when they see you take care of things, that's the biggest guide for the people, as opposed to hundreds of hours of lectures that you can give them, yet they might not have any effect of that. And therefore, it is important for us to know that how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has spoken of this and has emphasized a great deal. For example, in Surah Fath, ayah number 11, it says, سَيَقُولُ لَكَ الْمُخَلَّفُونَ مِنَ الْعَرَابِ, those who remained behind of the Bedouins. So there were people, mukhallafun, they did not travel. شَغَلَتْنَا أَمْوَالُنَا وَأَهْلُونَا فَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَنَا. And will say to you, what these remained behind of the Bedouins, they will say to you, our properties and our families occupied us, so ask forgiveness for us. يَقُولُونَ بِأَلْسِنَتِهِمْ مَا لَيْسَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ. They say with their tongues what is not within their hearts. In other words, they're just making excuses that, it is our families and it is our wealth which did not allow us to travel with you and go along with you. And therefore, they're going to make this excuse by saying, يَقُولُونَ بِأَلْسِنَتِهِمْ, Allah says, مَا لَيْسَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ. They'll utter things from their tongue which is not in their heart. Then who could prevent Allah at all if he intended to harm you or intended for you benefit? So of course, it lies with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that how he wants to deal with such individuals. So I had already said it before, but the example of this tongue is like a sword. As long as it is in the sheath, in the case, it will neither get rusty nor does it pose any danger to anyone. As soon as this sword comes out of the sheath or the ghilaf, it becomes dangerous, especially if it was in the hands of someone who's insane, not mentally stable, and under the influence, intoxicated. But if the same sword was in the hands of a mujahid fi sabilillah, then of course it will be serving as the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are many such narrations how Ma'asumin distance themselves from those individuals who used, bad language. There's a narration, person by the name Umar ibn Nauman narrates from that our sixth Imam, Imam Jafar as-Sadiq والسلام, had a companion. And there were all types of people. Here you can understand the mayar of sahabiyat. So they were sahabi of the Holy Prophet. There were good and bad people in him. Just the fact that they were with the Holy Prophet does not mean that they became holy also. No, there were many munafiqeen there. Similarly, there were people in the times of Ma'asumin who hung out with Imams. They benefited from Imams, but then they also had other issues. So this person narrates that Imam Sadiq والسلام, he had a companion, and that companion was always with Imam. Wherever Imam would go, you would see this companion along with Imam. Once that companion came along with his ghulam, so this companion of Imam, he also had a servant, and so he brought his servant once while they were going to a marketplace or someplace with Imam والسلام. His servant was approached by a shopkeeper or someone who called his servant, "Oh, so-and-so, come over here." So the servant ran toward the shop. As he ran towards the shop, he could not hear his master. His master was calling him. He could not hear him. He went along to go ahead and see that shopkeeper that he wanted to go and see. As soon as Imam, along with this companion, arrived at that shop where this slave was standing, this master of the slave, this companion of our sixth Imam, he shouted at him. He yelled at him, and he used foul language, cursing him as well as his mother. Imam ﷺ was surprised and looked at this man, and he said such words. Upon hearing this, Imam became very upset. Umar ibn Nauman narrates that this man was never seen with Imam until his death. That's how Imam dealt with such individuals who did not use proper language. It was a custom back in the day in Arabia to treat your slaves like this. So it wasn't that he was speaking to someone of his own caliber, but Imam said, no, everyone is equal in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regardless. But to use such language toward any individual is not permissible, whether that person is a slave or a child or an adult. So therefore, this is understood how the usage of this tongue and how Ma'asumin alayhi salatu wasalam dealt with it. And therefore, from here we understand that the root of why danger of tongue is superior to others was mentioned last night. I wanted to just continue on with this discussion so we can bring it toward a close and toward an end. It's an important discussion in my personal humble opinion, and every time I go through this discussion and I read through this discussion, it's a reminder for me. And even if you have heard parts and gist of it before, there may be things which are, were said before, it still serves as a reminder that how it should be sometimes, because we tend to forget. We are, bombarded with knowledge and information left and right, and therefore a lot of things do slip out of our minds. So it is a good reminder for us to keep this in mind. One of the things that was mentioned, one of the follies of this tongue, and that I was counting above, were, lying was one of them. Slandering was one of them. Tuhmat, which we call it, right? Backbiting was one of them. And there's so many other things that I mentioned. But amongst all of them, if I was to ask you which one is the worst, is lying the worst? Is backbiting the worst? Is slandering someone the worst? Or other things that were mentioned, are they worse? The answer would be that lying is actually at the top of the list. You'd be surprised. Well, lying, that's something which so casually we go ahead and do. Sometimes for things which actually don't really matter, but sometimes for things which are actually very important, that we easily lie about it. And I'm not talking about, the lies that one might have, for example, at home, just to get by things, for example, although lying is always bad, but, in order to not cause any sort of dispute and discord, sometimes you have a lie here and there in order to keep things smooth. And then, for example, someone asks you, did you take care of this, bill, or did you pay the bill, or did you take care of, for example, buying this and that, or did you take out the trash, for example, or, did you run these errands, for example, and you may not have run those errands. So but you have intention of doing so. So you go ahead and lie so that, you don't get the adab and the itab, but you go ahead and perform that action. Usually parents telling their kids to go ahead and do something like this, to, for example, take the trash out, or for example, do something like this. They might lie saying, yeah, I've done it already. In fact, they have not done it. Although this is not a good habit, they should not lie for even small things like this, while they go ahead and perform that action, so that, they have done it afterwards. But still, I'm talking about any type of lie for that matter. But obviously something which would be more impactful, where the life of an individual depends, or for example, the honor and the integrity of an individual is there. Lying about that is indeed is a very big crime. So therefore, how is lying key to all the sins? There's a riwayat which mentions that, inshallah, I will get to afterwards at the end, that it is considered to be miftah and the key to all of the problems. And one of them is, this key to all of the problems is lying. That how lying is the key to all the sins. Listen to this beautiful tradition, again, from the Holy Prophet, Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That a person came to the Prophet and asked him for some advice. He said, guide me to the most beneficial thing that I can do. Again, people, they wanted to benefit from the Holy Prophet. And the beauty was that Ma'asumin, whenever someone would approach, they wouldn't have to spend hours and hours in their company to learn something from them. Even a sentence or two, a minute or two, would be enough for their guidance for the rest of their lives. Yeah, we find there were so many people, because of the hypocrisy in them, they could not benefit anything from the Holy Prophet and the wujud of the Holy Prophet. So he asked Prophet, what is the most beneficial thing that I can do? Prophet responded by saying, isdiq wala takzib wadnib min al-ma'asi ma shi'ta wa adnib min al-ma'asi ma shi'ta. He said, be truthful and never lie, and then commit any sins that you want to. Pay attention to what Prophet said to him. He said, be truthful and never resort to lying. That's the first advice. And then along with it, do whatever sin that you want to commit. He did not say do whatever you want to do. He said do whatever sin that you want to commit, as long as you are truthful and you never have to lie. This man left and he thought to himself, the Prophet has allowed me to commit any sin. He's sort of given me a license to sin. It's the Prophet of Islam, is the Prophet of Allah. So he said, if I did not lie, as long as I did not lie and I spoke the truth, I can commit any sin I want to. So while he was thinking about it, he was processing this information the Prophet had given to him. It came to his mind that, he can go ahead and do a sin, and as long as he didn't lie about it, it would be okay for him. So he thought to himself of going into a house and stealing, or worse yet, in some riwayat, committing adultery. But then said, what will I say to someone if they ask me what was I doing in that house? If someone saw me coming out of that house, they'll ask me, what were you doing in there? If I tell them the truth, then of course I'm gonna get a beating and I'll be punished. He understood the hikmah behind the kalam of the Holy Prophet, that if a person doesn't lie, he will never commit any other sins. If a person is always truthful, he will always refrain from committing any sins. That's why lying is considered to be what? Considered to be the key and the miftah and kilid of all of the sins. So coming back to how this lying emerges, what is the tool that is utilized for lying is this tongue. And that's why the root of why danger of tongue is superior to others is quite obvious. One of the reasons why it is easy is because, tongue has always been in the possession of insan. And I'm not talking about tongue in comparison with other organs. You say, well, other organs have always been in possession of insan as well. But we already mentioned last night how the crime of other organs is limited, where the crime of tongue is unlimited. If I was to commit a sin through my ears, through my eyes, it will only have effect on me at a personal level. but the things that I utter from my tongue will be affecting hundreds and thousands of people. And we gave many examples of people of influence, especially them. If they say something, it could change the economy of a country. It could impact the economy of the world, for that matter. It could impact so many lives around the globe by them saying a few words. So that's why the more the power you have, the more influence you have, more you have to be watchful of what you say through this tongue. So tongue has been always in the possession of insan, and as opposed to other means of sin, other elements of sin, which weren't there over the years, but they have only appeared in the recent time. For example, some of the drugs and the negative impact of these drugs. They were not always there. And even when they were there, they were not, as some of them are becoming legalized, they were not always legal. And even if they were legal, they were not that cheap, right? So they weren't always available, but now it is. Gambling, for example, it wasn't always there. It came about later on. Music and alcohol, these are the things that came and emerged later on, and the sins that are associated with it. But whereas the tongue has always been in your possession. Number two, there isn't any cost of using this tongue. Usually the other sins have expenses attached with them. So alcohol, gambling, drugs, music, all of these other things which may lead to haram, or themselves may be haram, there's a cost that is associated with it. You can't gamble without any money, right? You can't drink alcohol if you don't have money. You can't listen to haram music if you don't have money to purchase that music, or to buy the device in which you will listen to this music, for example, or to play those instruments which are not permissible. You'll have to spend money to go ahead and buy it. You'll have to take lessons to learn how to play it and to how to do all of these things. So there's cost associated with it. Whereas there's no cost of using this tongue. You just say, and now, this you may not be using your tongue, but you may be typing what you intend to say through your tongue. So social media then becomes your tongue, basically. If you send a text message, if you write something, that's basically your words. You'll be responsible for what you have said, even if it's not emerging directly from your tongue, but it is your thoughts that are put together into this device, and you're conveying this message to others. Tongue is a tool which is available for majority, if not all. Whether other sins aren't always available for many. For example, consuming interest, riba, usury, is compared to be one of the worst. In comparison to adultery, 30 times worse than adultery is riba. The gambling is only one who has wealth of any sort, or one who invests somewhere is going to be waiting for some sort of interest from it. But tongue, you don't have to spend much, or you don't have to spend anything in order to go ahead and utilize it. Sinning through tongue is actually taken for granted because it's so easy. Adultery is a big crime. Drinking alcohol, or other gambling, for example. Right away, there's this label attached with it, right? So there's a label attached with it that is forbidden and one should not get close to it. But using this tongue and sinning through this tongue is taken for granted because, we hardly pay attention to what we have said and that we may have caused damage to someone. Its grandeur has been broken. Taqaddus has been violated. And that itself is an element which promotes sins in the society. For example, if a person asks you to stand clothless, without any clothes, outside in the street. So, well, as a Muslim, we're supposed to dress modestly. We're not supposed to show off our skin. To whatever extent it is allowed, it's allowed. But regardless, we're supposed to keep ourselves covered, both men and women. A little bit more for the women because of their head covering and everything, but for men as well, they should not be revealing their body parts. So if you were to ask this from a person who does not believe in these laws of Islam, they might not have any issue. I say, yeah, we go to the beaches and we're not wearing clothes anyway, so it's not a big deal for me. But even if you were to ask that person to stand clothless in front of a public gathering, that person, would not sign up to that. And so, well, only for a couple of minutes. And so would not do it. We all feel a little bit of dignity and honor in ourselves, right? But ask the same people to make others and to strip others of their clothes with their tongue, with the backbite that they do, they will do it without any hesitation. That's the effect of it. That when you utter words about someone, when you slander someone, when you backbite someone, when you utter things which are lie and associate them with them, you're basically stripping them of their clothes. While you yourself do not see yourself stripping and standing in front of public, but you would go ahead and easily do that for others because of the taqaddus of sinning with the tongue is gone. Whereas there's still a taqaddus of not committing those crimes and those sins which I mentioned before. And there's a beautiful hadith in this reference from Hazrat Isa والسلام, which I have mentioned before, so I'll skip through it and hopefully just rely on the fact that you guys remember it. That tradition which I was referring to, that I mentioned that lying is the key to all of the evils. And this is where we have a tradition that Ma'soom said, إن الله عز وجل جعل للشر أقفالا وجعل مفاتيح تلك الأقفال الشراب والكذب شر من الشراب. God has made locks for all of the evils. And the key to these evils is alcohol. But lying is more evil than alcohol. So it's the key to all of the evils is considered to be is lying. Maybe the reason is that when a person drinks, he's intoxicated. And that's why he ends up performing many, you have this DUI crime that you cannot drive under the influence. You get pulled over, there's some penalty. And you see on the highways all around, it says and has these messages that don't drink and drive. And I always say this, I know you may have heard this before from me, that why don't they just write don't drink, period. They're giving you the option. Why are they even giving you the option? Don't drink and drive. That don't be drunk while you are behind the wheels. But just tell them don't drink, period. And therefore, do we not have the bars closed in these days? Well, we have many other places closed as well, but people are surviving without it. But of course, it is a habit, and sometimes it's a habit which becomes addiction, and then this addiction is very difficult for people to leave. And therefore, people may do things because they lose their mind. When a person is intoxicated, they have gone from the level of being sane to insane. And when a person becomes insane, a lot of the things that they do, they're not held accountable for it. Although you are held accountable if you do something while you were drunk. But speaking from the perspective that if a person was insane, naturally speaking, then the actions of that person will not be taken seriously. And if they were to commit some crime or sin, they will not be punished in the same way as a normal person would be punished. So therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, maybe the reason behind this hadith is that a person who's intoxicated commits a sin is because they have lost their mind at the moment. They're intoxicated. They don't know what they're doing until this person becomes sober again. But a person who lies does it while he's sober. He's not under the influence. Therefore, the crime of, it is superior to even drinking. So insan can perform multiple sins through this tongue. Mullah Faid Kashani counts 20 major sins which sprout out of our tongues. Others have counted up to 200 of such sins and have mentioned them into the books of akhlaq. Distance between thawab and adab. The guna in tongue is very little. Little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, will make it a sin and the element of the downfall of humanity. And it could lead towards the little bit towards the right, it could lead towards prosperity for you. And the prime example of that is what? Someone would say, La ilaha. That's a big sin. You're denouncing that there isn't any God, right? If you just say La ilaha and you stop, you've uttered a word which is, not permissible. You're denying the wujud and the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if you were to say La ilaha illallah right away, this is Ain Tawheed. This is monotheism at its peak. See how quickly your words can change the meaning. And that's why a lot of people take Quranic ayat out of context as well. You know, the ayat of Quran says, La taqrabus salat. They say, well, you know, Quran is saying don't approach the prayer. But they don't read the entire passage where it says, Wa antum sukara. That while you are intoxicated, because when you're intoxicated, you don't know what you're saying. And therefore, don't consume, don't become intoxicated, and therefore don't approach the salat while you are in this state of intoxication. Since through our tongues have social aspect, whereas the other organs don't. For example, listening to music or looking at na-mahram has ill effects for individual himself. But lying and backbiting and blaming someone falsely and dishonoring and not performing amr and nahi will affect the entire society and entire community. So therefore, there are more devastating aspects and the effects of it. This is why Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam al-Muttaqeen Ali ibn Abi Talib, in that famous khutbah of his Khutbah al-Muttaqeen, which I have spoken for you, you know, for many, many years behind that pulpit, standing for Jummah khutbah. Imam, when he speaks of the attribute of Muttaqeen, he says, فَالْمُتَّقُونَ فِيهَا هُمْ أَهْلُ الْفَضَائِلِ وَمَنْطِقُهُمُ الصَّوَابِ. That according to him, the Muttaqun, or those who are the pious ones, they are those who possess virtues and their mantiq and their speech is without any error. Here we'll mention 4 cures for this deadly disease. Yes, this tongue that we have, if it's not used properly, then it becomes a deadly disease. You know, I start speaking and then by the time I look at the clock and I see that I'm almost out of my time. But I want to finish this concept and this discussion, so I'll go through it quickly, as it may be something which is, you know, known for other people. Many of you already know this stuff. So it's not going to be that difficult for you to comprehend. And hopefully the children in the house, maybe then you can further explain to them what was said. So what are the 4 cures for this deadly disease? Even if one of these cures are adopted and utilized in its entirety, one will definitely find a cure from this illness of, you know, using this tongue in improper fashion. Number 1, first and foremost, which we learn from the kalam of Ma'sumin, is silence. Silence is the best remedy. Silence is the best cure for, you know, controlling one's tongue. The less you speak, the less the chance is for you to make any mistakes. Al-mar'u makhbu'un tahta lisaneh. That a person is, you know, makhfi, hiding and concealed under and beneath his tongue. Unless he speaks, good and bad is not understood. So silence we find in many traditions, the command to keep silence where it is not necessary for you to speak. Hence, more a person speaks, the higher the chances of them making mistakes and committing the sins. Prophet said that La yaslamu ahadun min ad-dunub hatta yakhzuna lisana. None will be safe from sinning unless he hides his tongue in a wall. None. Nobody. Therefore, we can deduce from this hadith that tongue is the key to all the vices and sins. And the fact that Prophet used the word ad-dunub with alif lam on top of the plural of dhanb, which is dunub, here no one should think staying silent in places where one must stand up and raise his or her voice. No, that's not what Prophet means over here. But when he uses ad-dunub, he's encompassing all of the zunub, all of the sins that there are. So what's required is tarkun ma la ya'nih. Avoid saying which is not useful. First of all, it's not useful. It's not going to have any good impact. It's definitely not going to have any good impact. But still, you go ahead and say it. Well, I'm not going to let the opportunity go past. I have this opportunity to say something, to score some points. I'm going to go ahead and say it. No. Tarkun ma la ya'ni. Avoid saying which is not useful and which is not necessary to be said. If anything, it's only going to annoy the person in front of you. It's only going to bother them. It's only going to be bothersome to them. This is where Amir al-Mu'mineen says, Al-mar'u makhbu'un tahta lisan, as I said before. He's hidden beneath his tongue. Because if he opens his mouth, his virtues and vices are recognized. So, إذا تم العقل نقص الكلام. As this is one of the signs of the completion of your aql. That hadith says, the wiser a man is, the less talkative he will be. That's one of the signs of someone's intelligence, that the less they speak, the lesser they talk. And this is where they are carrying with them this immense amount of knowledge. Second is first think, then talk. Yes, it's again easy said than done. And we want to just say something. We don't want to lose the opportunity. No, it says tafakkur qabla talaffuz. That you think and you contemplate before you go ahead and spell it out. Another cure for this illness is thinking before talking. It is a complete manifestation of the kalam. Less or selective speech is a pearl, right? You've heard that? The less or selective speech is a pearl. Therefore, there are a couple of narrations in this reference where Imam compares a mu'min and a munafiq. I'll skip through those narrations. Number 3, one should be wary of being washed at all times. Yes. Sometimes we tend to forget. Alam ya'alam bi anna Allah yara. You do not know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching over them. So when we say something, even if nobody's watching, who's watching? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching. These kiram and katibin are watching. Those who are scribing our good and our bad, they are watching, and they will be documenting as well. So if we knew that someone is watching and listening to us all the time, then we would be careful. You know how when you are with your friends, you may say some stuff, hopefully nothing too bad, but you speak with your friends in a way that when you were in front of your kids, you may not say those words. Although it may not be appropriate over there, then it would not be appropriate over here either. But there's this hijab that you have when it comes to, for example, when you're standing in front of the children, or when you're standing in front of the adults, when you're standing in front of, someone who's your elder, your father, your grandfather, your mother, your sister, your brother, your children. One way you speak, but when those who are close to you, for example, your friends that you have grown up with, same age as you, the type of, discussions that you have, or the way you talk to one another, there's frankness, there's openness with you. So you might say stuff at that time, but you should always be wary of being washed. Therefore, when we're standing in front of kids, we know that the kids are watching, so we're going to be very careful. You see even, people who can't control anything, but as soon as they're in front of the camera, as soon as they're in front of, for example, children, then they become very, very careful. And lastly, our speech is actually part of our actions. And I'll leave it to that. Speech is part of our actions. Prophet said, ihfaz lisanaka. Person said, Ya Rasulullah, Awsini, give me advice. Prophet said, ihfaz lisanaka. He said, Ya Rasulullah, Awsini. He said, ihfaz lisanaka. Qala, Ya Rasulullah, Awsini. Prophet said, ihfaz lisanaka. 3 times Prophet said to him that go ahead and protect your tongue. Protect your tongue. Protect your tongue. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives us the ability and the tawfiq to be able to protect this tongue from saying things and using it for any negative purpose, for hurting anyone, for harming anyone, to use it for backbiting or for slandering someone or for lying for that matter. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that in this day and age, and these days rather of month of Ramadan that we're going through, the days of blessings and the mercy, that while we are restraining from many things, when we are talking, when we're fasting throughout the day, we're restraining from many things. This also becomes one of those things that we restrain and we have control over. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of our weighted Imam and make us amongst the helpers and the soldiers of Imam. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ahli baytihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin al-ma'sumin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Inshallah, at the end, I will conclude with this dua that we've been concluding with for the past couple of days. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma adkhil ala ahli al-qubur as-surur. اللهم أغني كل فقير، اللهم اشبع كل جائع، اللهم اكس كل عريان، اللهم اقض دين كل مدين، اللهم فرج عن كل مكروب، اللهم رد كل غريب، اللهم فك كل أسير، اللهم أصلح كل فاسد من أمور المسلمين، اللهم اشف كل مريض، اللهم اشف كل مريض، اللهم اشف كل مريض، اللهم سد فقرنا بغناك، اللهم غير سوء حالنا بحسن حالك، اللهم اغز عنا الدين واغننا من الفقر، إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Inshallah, join us tomorrow at 7 p.m. with the group recitation of Holy Quran. You can follow along with us. Inshallah, we'll have a short tafsir following the recitation of the 9th juz of tomorrow of Quran. And also, inshallah, tomorrow night, the program will be slightly different. And starting at 9 o'clock, we will have Dua Iftitah, followed by a short Marsiya. Inshallah, we will be commemorating the wafat of Bibi Khadija, salamullahi alayha, as it will be the night of her wafat, which is the 10th of month of Ramadan. So, inshallah, tomorrow night, we will have discussion about Bibi Khadija as well as the Masaib towards the end, and inshallah followed by the dua in the conclusion. For other programs that inshallah are coming up, please take a look out for the emails that are normally sent out. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.